All right, everybody. My name's Derek. I currently work for LookListen as a front-end developer. It's my official title with them. I was in G46 with James, and I really love D3. So I've come here today for today and tomorrow to kind of give you guys a full run-through of D3. Today is going to be a code-along. Last time I did D3, I didn't do a code-along, and it kind of seemed like it just went over a bunch of people's heads because they just saw me do some stuff, and they're like, oh, well, that was cool, but not very useful. So we may run into time issues, but that will be. So just a little background of D3 and how I want to break up the 2 days. So today I'm going to give you a general overview of D3, a little bit of history, what it's about. We're going to make a few bar charts today. So we're going to go through Mike Bostock, who's one of the creators' tutorials, and just step by step, sort of explain what's going on, how D3 is operating, just so that you can get your feet wet with D3 and how it works. We're going to have some different data structures that we're going to pull in. Last time I did D3, I did a visual one about something called the M-body problem. Basically, it's a bunch of brightly colored lights floating around a center point of gravity. And it looks really cool, but it's really useless and definitely not how D3 is used. So this time I figured we go more data-driven, bar charts, pie charts, and the transitions and different functionality therein. So we're going to look at some different data structures today that you can pull into D3, and we are going to pull from a file. These are pretty much the basics of D3. Tomorrow I'm going to go ahead and spin up an API with constantly changing data and maybe do a sort of sockets project where we can have a D3 graph or something that's constantly updating and changing, because that's one of the cool parts of D3 is it's hyper fast and you can sort of update it on the fly instead of the static charts that we'll be looking at today. I think we'll do a pie chart tomorrow. I can just toss it up to popular opinion because D3 you can do a whole lot of different charts, a whole lot of different data visualization. And then sort of start getting into transitions. D3 can also be used as an animation tool, which is actually how I use it on my personal site that I enjoy showing off. And also that background there is a Chrome extension that's done in D3 that I did for my Q1. That's a Circos graph. And then if you look here on my personal site, the DK in the center is D3 Voronoi spirals, which is more of an advanced concept. That's actually used to display data, but I just made it move around randomly in different shades of green. No, that's why D3 is here. So people who are bad at math can do cool charts and data visualization. And yeah, I'll get to just sort of what D3 is in a second here and like how it's used. So that's sort of the makeup of today and tomorrow, if you guys are going to be in on tomorrow's as well. So what is D3? D3 stands for Data-Driven Documents. So it's interactive and dynamic data visualizations. It was in 2011 by this group of people, but mainly Mike Bostock. And it was created as a replacement for Protavis, which was their first data visualization library. It's kind of a mishmash of a lot of stuff, kind of running slow. So these guys all got together and said, hey, we're going to make D3 awesome. And they did. And it's hyper fast. And those are that's sort of the benefits that they brought with D3 over Protavis. So D3 is not really something you learn entirely. It's not like a language because this is from an article on Medium called The Problem with D3 is you look at a cool D3 visualization on some website like the Eames Lounge and you go, oh, that's sweet. I want to learn how they did that. And then you look at D3's API and it looks something like this. And there are countless different D3 libraries. They've totally modularized it. So it's separated into, if you need to do a pie chart, you get D3 pie. If you need to do a bar chart, you do D3 bar. And there's a ton of them and definitely way too much to learn. So really what you want to wrap your heads around is D3 at a high level, how it operates. And then when you need to do something that's more distinct, then you just find the tool that you need to use and not try and mash everything in and be the D3 god. So for example, this bar chart, if you ask me how to do that would be simple enough, just simple D3 bar. But if you ask me how to do a radial normalized stacked bar chart, then that would take some looking around and how to do that. But D3 has a ton of functionality. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to get started on the first bar chart. And I did not, if you guys are coding along, then you can go ahead and add this in. All I'm starting out with is just a basic HTML file and just some simple CSS styles for the bar chart that we create. Yes, James? Yes, I can do that. There we go. So let's go ahead and get started here. So basically the way D3 works is it is a DOM manipulator. That's all it does. It's a DOM manipulator with built-in math functions, essentially. So what you're going to do is you're going to select, just like with normal JavaScript, you're going to select elements and then you'll create them as D3 objects and then use the built-in math functionality of D3 to manipulate different CSS properties of that object. So let's go ahead and start with, let's see here. So basically what we're going to do is we need to add in, sorry, just a moment here. So first, what we need to do is include we need a div, which is going to be that HTML element that we're going to feed to D3 to manipulate. And then we're just going to give that a class of chart, which is how we're going to be able to manipulate that. Then we need to bring in the actual D3 library. Everything that we're doing in this day of D3 is going to be totally front end. So we're going to include everything via script tags. So let me go ahead and correct this here. So all we've done at this point is we have that div tag that is going to basically be the container for our chart, and we've included the D3 library. And then what we need to do is create a script tag, which is going to be the JavaScript logic of our of D3 and how we're going to do this. First, we're going to start off with our data. Now this is normally going to be pulled in when you use D3 in the real world via API or via file, but just for this simplicity, we're going to go ahead and just do an array of numbers here. And this is what we're going to feed into D3 after we've fed in that div tag, and it's going to convert this into what we want it to do to the graph. All right, and then now what we're going to do is this is basically creating the scale. And we're going to do a linear scale, and this is for anything line charts, bar charts, anything that has a directly sort of 1 out of 10, like anything proportional. You want to scale these linearly in the visual effect. So you can do different scales for different data. It's really, I mean, it's such a large library in how they do it that there's all sorts of scales. Then we're going to set a domain on this, d3.scale.linear.domain. This is going to be the structure of how D3 really operates. It's functions chained on functions. The reason they did this is they want it to look a lot like sort of CSS definitions. Each list of functions is going to define a certain part of the graph or the graph entirely. So the way that this works is we want the domain of the graph to be from 0 to d3.max, and then this is where we feed in that data object there that we created above. And then we need to create a range, and this has to do with the size, and I can cover more of this after we actually get a graph up on the screen to see how this is working. So basically everything that we've done in this declaration has to do with the actual data. We haven't done anything visual yet. We're just feeding in that data to D3 scale linear operation, and then we're telling it how we want it to manipulate those numbers. This is all just prepping the data for the actual chart. Next, what we're going to do is actually create the visualization here by doing d3.select, which operates just like a CSS selector, and that's why we put that chart class tag, so we want it to select that chart. Then with this next select all function, basically what we're doing is every data point that we have that we're feeding into D3, it's going to do the following functions for each of those. It's just takes a little getting used to, but so basically it's going to create a div for every data point inside those divs. Then what we want to do next is the D3 enter function. So this basically says, okay, we're going to create a div for each data point. Now we're entering in and we're going to give you instructions for how to visualize each of those data points. So first what we're going to do is we're going to append a div. Man, this is tough with multiple screens. All right. So we're going to append a div for each data point. Then we're going to manipulate the style. We're going to manipulate the width of each of these divs. And then what you do is you have a callback function that you feed in there for how we're going to change that, that width. And it takes in D, which is the data point that we're operating on here. And what we're going to do is, yes.
Can you clarify what the data point that we're operating on is right there?
So what it's going to do is it's going to loop through each of these because we've fed in, right, div, yeah. So we've fed in data. And then what it's going to do is it's going to go through each of these data points. So on the first round, D is going to be 4. Second round, D is going to be 8. And so it's doing that callback function on each of those. So we're going to take in that each data point. We're going to manipulate it with our X function above. So kind of scale it out to how large we want it to be. So it won't exactly be 4, 8, 15, 16. It's going to be, you know, if we want the graph wider, then the width needs to be wider in proportion to the other data points. So we're going to return XD plus pixels. So we're changing that width attribute on each div element to our modified modified data point there. And then what we also want to do is a very common D3.text. We want to be able to append the data point to each div so that we can actually tell what the number is, and it's not just a relative graph. So we're going to do .text, and again, it's a callback function with that data point. And we're just going to return that data point. So, did a whole lot there. Let's see if it worked out. I'm live coding, which is stupid, but uh-oh.
That sweet air you got. What up? Can't see.
Hold on. D3.select.selectAll.enter is not a function.
Why not?
Oh, I'm forgetting a key part that we didn't do. I didn't append the actual data. Yeah, there we go. So after, of course, first bar chart, live coding. Okay. So we actually need to append the data. Yeah, okay, so that's why I was confused before. We actually need to feed in the data on our scale linear bit here, and we also need to feed it in on the visualization, because otherwise, how would it have access to this data point if we don't feed it in through the data function? So save this here. There we go, first bar chart. Very simple D3, just a few lines, and just from that scale linear function and from the actual visual functions, totally abstracted, we've created a bar chart. Now, this is sort of the advantage of D3, is we didn't have to do, we just told it what we want the domain to be, what we want the range to be. It figured out the exact pixels for us and put it up there for us. And actually, we could change the width and height of that bar chart all we wanted, and it does all that math for us just through very abstracted functions. Did everyone pull that off who's live coding along with? Is that working out? Yes?
So the domain is saying this is our low point and our high point,
Yes.
And then the range, what's the range time?
So the range is,
Is that not just X and Y axis?
yeah, so I think range has to do, let me just,
Let's Google it.
so you gotta do it. So range, I believe, has to do, this is actually, I'm just showing you basic D3 with divs. We're actually gonna get into SVGs next, which is how it's actually used, but range has to do with the actual size of the bars.
And then, Derek, earlier you were talking about the libraries for the tools in D3.
Yes,
Right now, when you're calling in D3, that's all.
we're calling in everything, yes.
What do you use to just? Is it just another script tag, or it's not an npm package, right?
Nope,
To call
it
in
would
other
be,
libraries.
you could just do that.
Cool.
But we're going to pull in the whole library for all this. D3 has integrations with Angular, React, a whole bunch of front-end frameworks, and you can also use D3's math functions on the back end. And when you do that through NPM packages, you would pull in individual D3 bar, import D3 bar, import D3 pi, that kind of stuff. All right. Any other questions on this one? This is just basic, creating divs within a div, scaling them out to the range and domain that we want, and then that CSS that we had in the very beginning is styling it with that blue and the white text at the very end. But next what we're going to get into is SVG, because SVG is better than HTML elements. HTML elements are always rectangular. You can do CSS transforms to make them look differently, but it's just a nightmare. So the main way that we're going to use, the main way that you use D3 when you're actually using it in a professional setting, I have used it before, is with SVG manipulation. So let me go ahead and...
Derek, what's an SVG?
SVG is a scalable vector graphic. Has anyone worked with SVGs before or any familiarity? We got one. So basically SVGs, how they operate, let me see if I can bring up. So basically SVGs are different than rasterized images like PNGs, JPEGs, GIFs, because they don't actually declare each and every pixel of the image. SVGs are instructions for how to draw something. So you have your SVG tag with descriptors on there, and then like a rect tag. I know there's fill tags, there's circle tags. So you're basically giving it instructions on how to draw something in what color, at what opacity. So basically you can scale it up and down all you want to without losing any detail. It's also very fast, which is cool. So let me go ahead and get set up for the SVG because it is slightly different with how you do that with D3. All right. So if you guys want to code along, we're just going to start again just with a little more CSS. We're going to go back to the start if you want to create a new document or something, or just do what I did, and we're just going to manipulate the same document. And then basically what we are going to do and how it's done is D3 is going to create this for us by the end. So that is what SVG looks like in HTML. So basically it's going to go through with just a few lines of D3 and create an exact SVG. SVGs do have to be, they are absolutely sized in HTML. So let me see here.
So does that mean they don't dynamically size?
No. You can, D3 will manipulate them. So D3 is a tool that you can actually use to resize SVGs on the fly. But if you were just creating SVG tags, if you were doing them by hand, you have to declare the exact widths, heights, positions of everything beforehand, and then basically redraw it if you want to resize it. But D3 will do that for you, which is pretty cool. So let me Just a moment here. All right. So what we're going to go ahead and do is just like last time, we need the element for D3 to manipulate. But this time it's going to be an SVG element that we're going to be drawing inside of. Whoops. Still getting used to code. I've switched from Atom. I'm done with Atom. And Microsoft's coming to the light side for some reason.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I still don't. It'll take a few years before I can trust them. Alrighty. We're going to go ahead and bring in D3JS there. So we are back to where we started last time. And then we need to create our script tag that we're going to do all of our D3 logic in. So once again, we need data to operate on. For this time, we are going to, once again, just create an array. You will never see D3 like this usually, but it gives us some sample data to work on here. And then, because SVGs are statically sized, we need to go ahead and create those now. So we want the width to be 420. And then we want our bar heights on each of those SVG rectangles to be 20 pixels.
Why do you, I've seen that now, the same numbers over and over again. Why those numbers?
Just random, generic, yeah. We could totally switch them up. Yeah, it's just going to scale those numbers. Yeah, you could swap them out. And I'll do that after we get this one up and working. And this is going to look, basically what I'm doing is the exact same bar chart again. Just this time it's going to be drawn using SVG instead of divs. So let's go ahead and set up our domain and range on a linear scale again. So this is going to look exactly the same just because this is totally independent of SVG or divs. This is just setting up how we want D3 to manipulate those data points. All right, yeah. Okay, so we've set up our scale there. Next, we're going to go ahead and create our chart. This time we actually are going to create it before appending stuff to it. So we're going to D3 select that dot chart. And then we're going to go ahead and set the width to be the width. And then we want the height to be our bar height for each bar times data.length. So we're actually dynamically creating everything there so we can actually scale up and down without having to do anything crazy. All right, so now we are going to create G elements. G elements are what you see with SVG. Can anyone guess what that stands for with an SVG? The G tag? Close. Groups. So we're basically going to group in. We need our rectangle and we need our text. Those are going to be tied together and they're going to be on the same relative location. So we're going to group those together with G tags. You are going to see these all the time in D3. It did take me way too long to find out what G stood for. All right. So we're going to do the same thing we did before with divs, but this time with G tags. We're going to go ahead and feed our data into there. And we're going to enter it we want to append, whoops. We want to append the G tag to the chart that we have up there, the dot chart. Then what we're going to do is transform. So this has to do with SVGs as well. Basically, when you're drawing an SVG, you have to move the pen and then tell it how big to draw. So for each one, we're going to have to move down before drawing that rectangle. So we are going to transform. And we have our data point, and we have our index that will also come in. And on that function that we did before, so function D, we could have had the I. The I comes along every time. That's just the index of the data point that we're operating on. And we're going to return translate 0 to the x-axis. Come on. Plus the index times the bar height, and then close out that parenthesis. So it's actually directly manipulating what is going on here.
Derek, is this like kind of like the standard? You said you were going off the tutorial. Is this like the standard method that you, if you would do this, like how did you figure this out?
So yeah, so this is basically very standard for how you bring in data. It is in this tutorial, but this is how you're going to bring data in, especially if you're doing SVG bar charts especially. I mean, with pie charts, it's rotation. With bar charts, it's going to be X and Y manipulation there.
I guess I was talking specifically about when you're using translate, you know to do I times bar height. I mean, that's just from the tutorial.
That's from the tutorial, but it logically makes sense as well. Because if you're on the first bar, index 0, you want it to translate 0, 0. You're at the top left. By the way, I kind of assumed everyone knew that. When you're drawing SVGs, you start from the top left. It's just like exact positioning in CSS. So index 0, first bar, you want to be at 0, 0. First one, or second one, index 1 times bar height. So we're going to move down that first bar that we drew times I, and then we're going to draw it there. So on and so forth. Alrighty. So there we go. We've appended our G element and transformed it down for each one where we want to draw that bar. Next, what we need to do is append to that G element the rectangle. So this is going to be the actual bar that we're drawing. Then we need to set attributes. And attributes, it's all attributes that you're affecting with D3. So it's going to be very common. So we want the width to be the X of the element. So the manipulated data point that we have up here. And then the height attribute we want to set as well, because that defaults to 0. And I forgot a period there. Whoops. Should have really printed these out. All right. And then the height, we want to be the bar height and then minus 1. You can think logically of why we have the minus 1 in there. Because if we do it at the exact bar height and we're moving down at the exact bar height, all of the bars will be touching, and so it won't really be a bar graph. So we're doing that 1 as a spacer in between bars. And then what we need to do, which we did last time with the div elements just as a text, we need to append text. Because we're in an SVG, we're no longer in an HTML element. We have to do it by SVG's rules. So you append a text element. We're going to set the X attribute. And then we're going to do the callback function with our data point. And then we're going to return the manipulated actual width of the bar according to that relative to the others. And then we're going to go minus 3. So it's going to be 3 pixels in from the end of the bar. So we're basically try to make this look exactly like we did. Exactly like we did on the other one here.
Are all measurements around pixels? Like, is there a way to switch into like EMs or something?
Not that I'm aware of. In SVG, I think it's all. Well, I guess it's units, right? Because it's SVG. Well, although no, you're converting SVG to pixels. I've never seen it done with EM. I'm sure there is a way. But yeah, so far with what I've done with D3, I haven't tried to do any unit conversion or anything like that. Alrighty. Then we need to set the Y attribute of where we want this text to be. We want it to be right in the middle of the bar height there.
I think you're missing a period there. 44.
Yeah. I may have to just mirror here. Just make sure I have everything right.
It's dy.
That is something I'm not familiar with. I didn't notice that before. I thought, yeah, just X and Y location, and then we're doing font size through the CSS. I don't know. We're going to play around with it. We're going to remove it and see what it does. And then the actual text of the text element, taking that data point and just return D there. So it'll actually be the text. Let's see if it works. There we go. So it's the exact same bar chart that we did before, but these are actually SVG rectangles and SVG text elements. Now let's go ahead and remove that dy and see what that is. That's the y and the dy. What the hell is y?
The numbers moved to the top when you removed it there. Instead of being like centered in the graph, they all moved to the top.
Yeah, but then what is y doing? Oh, okay. So yeah, so the y is moving it in in proportion to the actual bar height. So you can see with that dy back on there. Yeah, so we're moving it in the rectangle, and then we're moving it in adjustment to the baseline. So I think that dy is, we want it to be in the center of the rectangle, and we want it to draw it in the center of the baseline. So we got to center both, because otherwise it's going to move it down to the center, but it's still going to write as if the line is on the center. So it'll be slightly above. Cool. All right.
The dot data, you said that a lot of D3 does like mapping. Is that like the function map, or what is like dot data doing? It seems to start everything.
So dot data is the data that we're feeding into scale linear and into the visualization functions. So we're giving it data there.
So that whole data method is just like a whole bunch of functions in the D3 library that starts every command you're going to do?
Data is basically parsing out an array or a TSV or CSV file that we feed into it. So it's parsing it into this chart. So it's saying, here's the data you're going to use, and then it brings that in so that it can iterate over it and do those functions there. Alrighty, any other questions so far? All good? So the last thing that I wanted to cover today, just to give you guys an idea of different ways D3 can be used with a simple bar chart, is with their .tsv and .csv. So if you guys know, that's tab separated and comma separated values, different ways of formatting data in a file. So we're going to bring that file in, and then we are going to bring that file in, and then bring that into the data. So let's go ahead and do that.
Who ever used tab separated values? That sounds like a nightmare.
I did for this.
Commas in your data. You don't have to use tags.
You said tabs.
Tabs. You can do TSV or CSV.
Commas make more sense because that's easier to see. I feel.
What if there's a comma in your data?
God, I don't know.
I don't
Stressing
know.
me out.
There you go. That ruins it. And actually, if you view the tab separated stuff in a nice text editor, it's actually more readable than CSV, I think.
That's a big deal. I'm over there, right? That's right.
Come on, man. It's all about that
I think
TSV.
specific languages are garbage. Yeah.
Alrighty, so once again, there we go. Alrighty, so yeah, we're just starting out with that basic CSS that we started out with last time. Also, the reading in the data introduces asynchronicity with this, because when you start reading in files, or if you're reading from an API, you have to know to do certain things in D3 before making that async call, because otherwise it's going to make your page sort of jump around like crazy. So let's go ahead and start out with the two standard. We need our SVG tag that we're going to be manipulating, and we need to bring in D3. And for some reason in the tutorial they don't. There we go. And then we need our script tag for the D3 logic. All right.
Are you just doing it all on your HTML document for demo purposes, or would you normally put all your D3 in the document?
Normally, the only times I've really used D3 for projects or professionally, it's been with a framework. So it's more separated that way. For something this simple, you would do it, I guess you could do it inline or include it as a file. But yeah, usually if you're using it with like a framework or something, it'll be separated up into different modules or something, so it does that naturally for you. Yeah, normally I do not inline JavaScript. Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, so it's going to be sort of the same deal from before because we're doing an SVG again. So we need to set the width, and we need to set our bar height. All right. So we're going to set our scale again, but this time we're only going to set the range. And this is because we don't have our data yet. And this is really how you're going to be using D3. You got to read in your data. So, but it's good to set all of the things that you can about the graph or visualization that you're creating as early as possible. So we're going to do our linear scale, and we're going to do our range, which is going to go out to the width there. So it's basically stretching out our graph to the desired width instead of doing exact pixel values with the data points. And then we're going to go ahead and create our D3 chart selection here. And then, of course, set that visual width to our designated width above. Then we're going to call in the pretty eponymous D3 function, d3.tsv, and then for CSV, it's the same thing, d3.csv. Now, what I do have to do is, because of CORS errors, can't do this locally. Hold on, let me find it. I hosted it in Amazon so we could play around with it and see it work. Just a moment. D3.tsv, boom, publicly hosted link there. Just gonna copy that down. And if we want to look at what is in there, just so you can see how we're reading it. It won't even parse it, will
We need that extension.
it? Somebody really cool. I host D3 a
I
lot.
heard about that too.
There we go. So yeah, so you have your header values just like in a CSV, except all these tabs will be commas. And then this time we're going to be pulling in, and this is more likely with the data that you're using, is labeled numbers. And this is just the data that I pulled from the tutorial. So I see a lock in there and a quan, so I have no idea. But yeah, labeled data is going to be much more commonly what you're working with. Alrighty. So we're going to pull in that TSV file, and then it's going to be a callback function since that's asynchronous. So once it's read in that file, we're going to have our error, so we can be good error trackers like good programmers. And we're going to have our data. So now that we actually have our data after the asynchronous request is processed, then we need to go ahead and set the domain like we did before. And then we're just going to do basically all the same stuff that we did before when we created the SVG graph. Just now we actually have our data. Then we're going to enter in, and we're going to append that group tag. And then we're going to move the pen, I like to think of it as, down to where we need to start drawing. Then I times the bar height, just like before. Then we are going to append a rectangle. Basically all the same stuff we did before.
Eric, how's their documentation? Like looking up, is it pretty intuitive to find like select all G or X or all of those things? Or is that
Very good for basic stuff. Yeah, they really wrote out a lot of documentation on the basic stuff, and there's also a lot of really cool tutorials. Once you start getting into more complicated stuff like Circos graphs or Voronoi spirals, it's a little more out there, and they don't really have the coverage. But you can just sort of figure it out. I've found that D3 functions and sort of the process that they thought through, it's pretty easy to think through yourself. I've gotten myself out of some sticky situations with it before. And now, because we're actually pulling in data, and it's not actually in an array, we have to do the value that it brought in. You're going to have, I believe it's name. I believe it's name and value. Yeah. So it's the It's the actual. Where's Adam? Yeah. So we're referencing them by the actual header values that we put in here in our TSV document. Then we need to set our height.
Sure, with the 19 quotes.
Very astute. All right, and then we need to go ahead and append the text just like we did before. Everything from here on out is going to be repetitious to what we did before. Set the x value, data point. Yes. And tomorrow, I'm going to have notes printed out so that I'm actually looking on my screen at what I'm typing.
Your X function, do you want capital V? Bar appends attribute X.
42. Did I capitalize? No, I did not. Yeah. Lowercase d there. Thank you. Saving me here. And then we're going to append the actual text. Now there is one more thing that we need to do before this will work, which I'm sure a lot of you have experienced with pulling in from an API or from an external file, is that it reads numbers. It reads numbers as strings. There we go. And then I believe we're calling that trying to see where we're calling that down here. We may not be. But we need to be for the scale linear. Well, let's give it a shot. Not good.
Imagine air handling on here is not that good.
Yeah, errors are not, because it will draw you how you tell it to draw, and it won't know that you messed up. Let me.
Just not calling the text somewhere where we need to do that.
I think so.
Can you inspect the container and see if that's not lined up to the graph?
420.
Ladies,
Let's see here. Bring this code back up. Oopsies. There we go. That's what I was missing. Yeah, so it's exactly like I said. I forgot to include the type here. So basically this is the middle function that it's going to toss it through to. It's going to read in that data, toss it through to our type function, change that to a number, and then we're going to have our actual numerical data there. So if we go back, this should now be correct. So we're actually reading that data in from a tab separated value file on Amazon S3, and then it's taking those data points, labeled data points, and it's actually converting them into an SVG bar graph. So do you guys think you're getting a general idea of sort of how D3 is structured there and kind of how they did that? That's what I wanted today to sort of be about. Let me get back to code here.
Can you scroll down to the bottom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chad,
Yes.
If you say you're getting like live data and you would update the graph then, how do you do that?
Yes, so we're going to get into d3.render, and that's going to be tomorrow. That's their animation function. So essentially what you're going to do in that case is instead of actually drawing SVGs here, we're going to actually use their PyGraph function. And then what you're going to do is basically feed new data into it with the .data function. And then you're going to call that chart.render. And then it's going to update. You can toss transitions on it as well. So if you want the bars to slowly move in and out to data points, you can have tweens as well. But yeah, I'm going to spin up an API tonight that does sort of random number generation through sockets, and then it'll kind of update our pie graph or bar graph. Or what I may do is just bring up a whole bunch of different graphs you can do, more data driven, and then sort of do popular opinion on those. I love sockets, even more than D3. Any other questions for now on this today? Just sort of a real basic, we're just going for structure today and how D3 sort of works like that, and showing a little external, starting to get into external data. And we're going to do pure external tomorrow because that's usually how D3 is used. All good? Yeah.
Yeah, and do you want to like slack out the code in 77 for the video?
For sure, yeah. I'm going to go ahead. I know you guys have sort of an online repository where you put videos and stuff, so I can give you the video file or something, and then
The 77 channel.
yeah, and then I'll go ahead and upload all this to GitHub if you guys want to take a look at the code for those of you who didn't live code.
Awesome, great.
That's it for today. See you tomorrow.